get going. All right. Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. Hope you're doing well. Thank you for watching this exclusive interview that we're having right now live on Twitch, recorded and later uploaded to YouTube with Parker and Richie of Injury Reserve, whose latest full-length LP, by the time I get to Phoenix, is going to be coming out very soon. We're going to be talking about that and anything else that comes up in this conversation. Guys, how are you doing?
Good. Awesome. Definitely awesome.
All right. Look, I'm going to try to get together as many questions for you personally that I have about this new record, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions that the fans want to ask later into the interview. So just kind of get through some basics of everything that's been going on lately in the new LP. To kick things off, would you be able to, I guess, kind of explain what was the inspiration for the title and the cover of, the new LP? Like, what is this representing as far as like the message or the direction of the new record and the group sound?
The title, oh man, it can get it's just open-ended enough to be able to get like really heady, and I think we've had so much time to sit with it that could like ramble way too long about
Hey,
it.
we have time. We have like an hour to ramble, so just go ahead. That's why we're all here.
Um, I would say, well, obviously it comes from the Isaac Hayes song, which was a Glenn Campbell song, was like a lot of other people's songs, and something about that. It's like a difference in repetition thing, where it's people spinning it in all these ways, and then you have like by the time we get to Arizona, the Public Enemy one. So obviously we connected with the title in relationship to coming from Phoenix, but it also connected thematically in those ways. And then with this thing, the record kind of like wavers back and forth between, I think, this notion of getting to somewhere called Phoenix is like a really good open-ended thing that wavers between fatalistic and inspired. I don't know. Yeah, fatalistic and inspired emotions that kind of both happen a lot. That's what it is for me, I think, the most.
Yeah, I mean, given how the title ties into where you guys are from, I mean, in at least some ways, is this you guys getting back in touch with your roots in some way, or I don't know, can it be read in that way?
Literally in the fact that we moved back to Phoenix, like we're both living in the greater Phoenix area at the moment.
And even like the directional shift of like moving away from like Western, like, because we came from, like, we were posted up in LA for a while, and even like the concept like directionally of moving away from like that Western like utopia like coastal situation, definitely I would say has a lot to do with it too.
And was that something that just to get like a feel and an idea of the timeline and like what's kind of moving things, like was this a decision that you guys as a group had made, moving back like pretty early on, or was the passing of Groggs kind of like, the something that kind of drove this decision?
Well, he had moved back before either of us.
Yeah.
So he was actually there when we talked about the title, when we kind of like selected it, when he passed. Like,
he was definitely, that was actually probably one of the last major creative conversations that we had as a group, was based on the title. I know that they individually had a conversation about it and how excited that he was about it. So that it definitely came in regards to the creative process. It definitely came really late in regards to the songs. I mean, everything was done. There was nothing that was done creatively with that concept in mind. I think that, or at least explicitly, like obviously, you know, the brain will do, like, you'll look back and be like, damn, we were already on this tip or whatever. But I mean, the record was done. The record was done before we even had the title. And then the title was really just like, it wasn't even like a second guess to most of us. It was, once P brought it up front, it was like, oh, that's perfect. 100%.
You know, speaking of the creative process that you brought up, I guess to kind of get into the sound of the album from here, I don't know, man, like the teasers that you guys have dropped so far are like, so at least for me, I don't know what the fan reception has been. Like, it's so wildly experimental in comparison to just everything you guys have dropped so far. I mean, Knees came out, and admittedly, it took me a minute to wrap my head around that one, you know, and the more I sit with them, the more I appreciate like how stark and kind of bold and harsh, but also really soulful and melodic it is. And even though Super, you know, man, that has also hit me in like a really strong way, I'm still like kind of digesting it. So I don't know, would you guys mind going into each of these tracks with me and kind of like, I guess talking about what inspired the sonic direction of each, maybe starting with Knees?
Yeah, although it might be
probably easier to start.
Yeah, for us to.
Yeah.
Just because, so Superman, that was it was the song that we like referred to in the like letter that we wrote and posted. That one kind of came about very naturally and accidentally because I think this was like May 2019 when we were releasing the last album. We had like some festival and some release show type thing in London. So we were out there, and at the festival, Jockstrap, the band that we ended up touring with, they were there, and we kind of knew each other as we were hanging out. And Georgia was even like, oh, like, you should come check out this show for this new band I'm in. And they had one song out at the time, and it was Athens. And so like went and saw one of their sets, and I think I made the beat for Superman on that trip or right after that trip, just because.
It would have to be because I did the vocals in 2019 when we were on tour in Australia or in New Zealand. So it goes super back and way back. And it all really starts with, because we did a festival in Reykjavik in Iceland, and we were like going into sound check, and Jockstrap was sound checking, and we were like, what the fuck is this? So we have been friends with them for a minute. Yeah. Then we went to go do this festival in Brighton.
And the Iceland festival was even, isn't that where Black May recorded like their KXP?
The KXP, yeah. And then so basically we were already friends with them, and George's in Black Country New Road. He went to go see the show, and I think at that point he flipped it. I did the vocals for that song when we were touring in New Zealand. We were in Christchurch, and I did the vocals for it, but I didn't have any written vocals for it. And the production was not 100% what you're hearing now, because the big thing with that song in particular, Superman, that is, he had this beat. It was crazy. It's somewhat of what you guys hear now. It is what you guys hear now. But the big twist is I did the vocals for it. I didn't write the verse though. And that was it for a long time. I think I went running in Christchurch, and I was like daydreaming to it. And it was sometimes you just make something you think it's just for you, because the vocals are very simple and straightforward. You think, oh, maybe this isn't going to be anything like full, like coming to fruition. But then we were touring, and I tried showing them it, and I think everyone was kind of just like, oh, that's cool. And it was just more, the vocals were more low key. And I think that
did you play it, or did you like do it over?
Played it. Played the song in the van. Everyone was like, oh, that's cool. And I knew that because when we heard the beat, we imagined trying to do something very contrasting to the beat and doing like very straightforward rapping, which we thought would contrast it very, very well. And I just didn't do that. But that was it for a while. And then we're on the European tour for the self-titled album. We have a show in Switzerland, which was supposed to be a show. And we show up to the venue, and we're like, this isn't a venue, this is a restaurant. So we cannot play a real show here. So we were like, okay, let's do a DJ set. And then we were saying, well, what if we did some improv stuff during the DJ set? And I was like, well, why don't we try and do that Things of Black Country New Road beat that you did? And, you know, I already did some type of vocals, so let's just try to make it something. And when we did it, it had that live element to it that really separates the track, like especially the energy that was in the production that he was adding with the push, and then just the general energy that you have with your vocals live that you don't do when you're just recording something in a room or in bed or whatever. So because we thought it'd be cool, we had like the engineer do just in GarageBand, just record a one track of the whole set. And we ended up going back and listening to it and being like, this shit is crazy. And at this point, we were starting to try and figure out a new record. And we were like, this is crazy. Either we're just going to release this wave with no lyrics, or we're going to try and figure out the elements. So we were like, okay, we knew what took that to the next level. It was the intensity that came in the production live and the intensity that came in the delivery of the vocals. So I was like, okay, I'll try to remaster this, like re-perform this in bed. Like I'll just put my blanket over my head with like a SM58, because I'm trying to like match the energy to the same exact level. So I want to go to 100%. So I did that. And then Parker did, he was working with the way, like the one track. Yeah, the one track the same way. So what you're hearing right now is actually a mix between that original wave file that we did back in Switzerland.
Yep.
Not even wave file.
The board recording.
The board recording in guitar in
GarageBand.
In GarageBand, I'm saying Guitar Center. Did I say Guitar Center earlier?
You almost said Guitar Center.
and then a more produced version, but they're splicing in, and Zero was able to.
And that's kind of one of the first times we were like, damn, we might have to see if this guy would be interested in doing it, because I feel like he might be open to it. Was that song we knew we like anything that we were going to be able to make stems for was going to be like a reduction. So he mixed like the vocals to like a 2-track to keep like it just glues certain like live improvisational things together that wouldn't work as stems. And he still like was able to mix it just like
a full track out song.
It was probably one of the biggest differences in the mixing.
And you would think it'd be the hardest one.
Yeah, it is weird.
And it worked, and that really laid out the rest of the record. When we had that, we knew exactly what we wanted to do. And also, I feel like we've always wanted to do something like that, because we've always enjoyed having taking records to another level for the live show, to have just a different type of experience. And I think we've always tried to have that bounce back and bring that back into the recording. And that was an example of that. And there's actually other examples of it on the record where Parker approaches certain things that he would have probably only approached live, but he did it. Like you're at a certain point, you're responding to your own song.
Yeah.
You know.
No, absolutely.
Like you make a song and you're bouncing back from your own song, which is the best thing about being in a band, because we do that like to each other. But then when you have that time and you have that removal to then now respond to your own song and hit that flow, you know, it's just it works perfectly. So that song in particular is really what set everything up.
No, I was kind of curious as to whether that was like the process or the logic of the whole situation kind of driving the sound of these tracks, because I've seen you guys live a couple times at this point, but the last time I saw you live was like, you know, definitely a totally different experience, and not just because of the strobes that you know that you guys are working in, but it was, you know, a lot to do with the way Parker was like morphing all the beats and instrumentals live, and that was coming out so much more intense than just the original beats on the record, which caused like the vocals on top of that to be so much more intense than they were on the record. And you know, it was a great set, and I was thinking like, I wonder if them performing like this in a way where I can recognize the songs, but they feel like they're just coming from a totally different place. It feels like, you know, they're totally reinvented sonically in a way. I wonder if performing them in this way is going to then like result in this energy going in the studio, and then it's going to sound like this in the studio for like the next batch of tracks. And with that being the case, like how do you then, I guess, from there take these recordings and then be like, well, now we need to morph it again live, and have like, it sort of seems like it's almost like a cycle. Like how do you sort of like, how do you, for the live shows that you guys are gonna be doing for this record, I guess, like how do you leapfrog over these recordings now and be like, okay, now we're going to be able to do something different with these in person that we weren't in studio? And have you considered that sort of part of the equation yet?
That's what we're doing right now every day. Yeah. That's what we're doing right now. And that's the best thing about having Parker is there's that element of it in audio, and then there's a visual element of it. There's every element of it, and we can really sit down and figure out exactly what we're trying to communicate. And there's no leaps and bounds. Like it really can be as simple as us two in a room. We're not we don't have to communicate with anybody else. So that's and what it really comes down to is just trying to do something exciting, like boredom and competitiveness, and trying to do something new and have fun. I feel like we've always wanted to do that, but this record, for the first time, I feel like we feel the most proud, where we could sit back and be like, wow, we really did something of our own. However many records in, it's like, okay, wow, this is, it really feels proud. And you feel way better releasing that and taking that risk than putting out something that you're like, oh, people are gonna like this song, and just there's just something about that especially in the last record, that was just not as exciting. And this is more just like, at this point we don't even, maybe it's just being more mature or being more confident, or just being lucky enough that our fans they have open arms to accept anything that we put out, or at least try it. And we've gotten lucky in that situation, because now we're at the point where we're just gonna put stuff out because this is what we wanted to do, and that's the only way that we can do it now. We're so deep. We may be new to a lot of people, and we may be new to everybody else, but we're so deep in this situation that I feel like there's no other way that we could do this.
Another thing about the new record that reminded me of the last time I saw you guys live was actually the track listing. And I saw, at least for now, I don't know if this is going to be the case once it finally drops, but it looks like right now the only listed feature is Z Loopers. Is that the only listed feature on the record?
Yeah. That's the only vocal in general,
Yeah, because I remember when I saw you guys live, I had a little conversation with you before, you guys were doing sound check, and I remember you talking about how much you loved that Wild Card record that he did at that time. And, you were just like asking me, at least for a moment, like so many questions about it. Like, did you hear that Wild Card record? Have you heard this new Z Loopers thing? And I was like, I heard some of it. And you were just like really gaga for it at the time. And it caused me to go back to it and check it out again. But, it was just funny re-remembering that moment, and, enjoying his material around that time. Did that, drive you to sort of reach out and see if you could make something happen in terms of a feature for this record?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's an alien, man. We worked with him, and it was so intimidating. The way he just walked in the room, and was just like, where the beats at? And I was just like, whoa, this is like, before even because that was the first time we had met each other in person. And we hadn't even really talked that much. I think he just knew that I was a fan of his stuff, and because I really was. And I just felt like, on a rap tip, I was just like, who else is really coming this crazy? That such a good rapper and just paints pictures very, very clearly, double entendre. But that was something else, man. He did like 6 songs. Everything he was doing was just off the top. And I remember the song that we did here, Parker had the song concept. He had the production kind of laid out, and Parker said, yo, we should make a song about this. And it was some type of headline. We were like, okay, word. And I just freestyled a hook, but freestyling the hook that's a lot less intensive. And especially because some of the hooks are just more straightforward. and he just walked up there and did an extremely dense like verse off the top of his head. And then he just looked at me and he was like, "Are you about to go?" And I said, "Nope." I said, "No, I'm not doing that. I'm gonna take this home." Because I knew that we had a session the next day with him and Maxo. So we were like, I'll just come tomorrow with this shit. You know what I mean? So I went home and did it. And then I think I came and finished it the next day. But that was something that we really wanted to do. And we also wanted to make sure that everything that we did on this record was extremely just organic. And we didn't want to have to go through any leaps and bounds to get anything. And
the last one, there was like a lot of like premeditated features, and some of those moments were really, really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. They all worked out amazing.
Yeah, it was definitely a stressful process. It was like a time intensive process. It was a frustrating process because of how time intensive it was. I was happier to just be able to like make the music this time and not.
Yeah, the only thing that took so much time was the label situation. I mean, Grog's passing away, the label situation, and then the samples, because we were supposed to release this album last fall. I mean, this album's old. I know that's most people, especially when you get involved with samples and stuff like that, or clearing samples at least, but it's often for us that people are hearing things that we did a while ago. And sometimes you kind of wish that you could put things out the second they come out because they feel like they're more impressive. You know, I feel like this record would be more impressive if it came out a year ago. But at the same time, sometimes contextually, like you would think that would add a lot too, because what is going on has a lot to do with the record too. So I definitely wish that this record came out a year ago, but honestly, shit is so fucked up right now anyways.
Yeah, I mean that's honestly when I've been, you know, doing these interviews pretty regularly for over the past year, and it's a pretty common, you know, experience and occurrence these days that, you know, especially because of the pandemic, a lot of the stuff that we're hearing come out right now is old. You know, a lot of people have been sitting on their new record for a long time.
Yeah. It just sucks because it's really not our choice. It really wouldn't have been anything because we're releasing this record by ourselves, which ended up being great, nice. amazing for us. And we had done everything before the last record. We had done everything ourselves anyways, but that ended up just being perfect. And the way that this ended up working out on the logistics side was so stress-free, and it really allowed us, and especially Parker, to just drive the whole entire process forward. And that was great.
You know, without, I guess, like spoiling too much that you might not want to go into as far as like, you know, the live show and everything, because I know you've been kind of talking about that here and there. You know, for anybody who might have caught like the last series of performances before we went into lockdown and everything, like, you know, how have things changed for, you know, this current set of shows that people might be looking forward to seeing now from you guys? Like, are there still going to be like a lot of the strobes, other visuals, you know, anything like, you know, new or different in terms of presentation?
I think the lighting will, where before like the strobes were like the like, let's say 80% lead of it. I think now I want to bring in like some like filmic lighting too, like maybe some spotlights, strobes, spotlight, so it can take on like a little more of like I don't know, something that's also viewable,
like more cinematic type vibe.
It's hard to, so what we're working like on right now is like more of a release show type thing, so it's a bit different. I think it's going to be nailing this as much as we can, and then seeing how much of that we can translate to like an actual touring setup, because it's easier to do something in your where you live and set it all up once, but then taking that shit on the road is a little more like logistical, I guess.
I would say that the release show uh, is more conceptual. Like it's a little bit more for what Parker has laid out. It's a little bit more like conceptual than maybe what we would bring on the road, and it feels really tied into the project because this is for the project itself. It's not just for a concert, which is really exciting to me. I mean, if you could do that everywhere and try and do that, we probably would.
Yeah.
But we also know that people want to hear, our older material and stuff too. So yeah.
Just sort of, I guess, get a feel for where the group stands currently. And I think, you guys have kind of answered this question implicitly, like through some of the answers you've been getting and through the answers you've been giving and the way you've been kind of like describing your process and this new record and everything. But just to like, I guess, define it, like obviously with the passing of Groggs and this new record coming out, what does it mean for Injury Reserve as a group going forward? Like, is this, the last record, or is it the last record as Injury Reserve, at least in your minds with the creative dynamic changing so radically? Like, is Injury Reserve still Injury Reserve from this point forward, or is it something else in your minds?
Yeah, I think, well, the real thing is that we really haven't even had those type of conversations yet because the creative dynamic hasn't changed yet because we're still working on the same project that we've been working on for the last year.
Sure.
So, I mean, I don't want to speak for both of us, but really, like, that's really the way that we have kind of approached this whole situation is let's finish this album and see this album through before we even have conversations like that. What are you saying?
I think that will teach, or not teach, but we'll be able to pick up on what the answer to that is through that process too. Because otherwise it's like just kind of making the decision based on like what you think it will be. But like having to tour without him, I think those things will help us figure out what that actually would mean for like doing it.
Yeah.
What it felt like.
The tour is definitely the craziest part because especially in the last couple of years, that's really how we spent most of our time as us three back together again, because, we're all grown now and he moved back to Phoenix before we did. And even just day to day, we don't like spend every single day together. And so most of our time that we all spent together was on the road. So when something like this happens, it's really easy for us to not really hit reality with the missing of Groggs until something like that, until you're on tour and you're checking into hotel rooms or you're on a flight and you know what I mean? Or you're sound checking and it's just you two on stage. Those are the real things that are kind of really probably hit us that I think that me personally, or honestly, most of the grief that I have gone through with people passing away has been like this, where it hasn't been a situation where it's someone that I see every single day. So it's a lot easier for my brain to kind of just be like, he's not here right now. You know what I mean? Like, or this, some type of situation like that. So in regards to a conversation like that, we haven't even really gone through that major thing that I think is going to really hit us, And I mean, I think there is a reality of the situation. It's funny because it's like, you can't tell yourself that, Groggs would probably tell you, you guys better just rock this shit out. You know what I mean? But also you got to remember like who was like the heart of the band and kind of like how we've never had a slogan before, but if we've ever had a slogan, it's been like 3 out of 3. You know what I mean? So it's just like, but the reality of the situation is we have also want to make sure that we give this project all its respect and all its attention before we even we straight up just haven't even had those conversations, because when everything went down, we were like, okay, let's all have some time before we even start talking about like because at this point music is like there's a business side to it before we even start talking about this. And I think like a month and a half went by, 2 months went by, and I think we were each, like me, him, and Nick were each kind of waiting for someone to be like, so are you guys ready to talk about if you want to put out this record, or you know what I mean? And I think that if the album had a different context, then, or even just sounded different, it just wouldn't have came out. Like if this was like the last album, it wouldn't have came out. If it had Gravy and Biscuits on it, it wouldn't have came out. If it was Floss Part 2, it wouldn't have came out, because that would have felt weird dropping a record like that after someone passed away for us.
Why is that? Because it sounded like something you'd done before?
No. Just like fun music just would not.
Oh,
like,
okay, I get it.
Like just like a celebratory something, just having a Gravy and Biscuits. Parker always says that, like, imagine dropping Gravy and Biscuits right now. How fucking weird that would be.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, this record already had tones of things that we were already feeling, because while we were making this record, my step-pop passed away. And that had a lot to do with the tone, that and what was happening, you know, like in regards environmentally and culturally, what was happening and globally. Those are the things that were really inspiring what we were making in this record. So when things happened, it was like, okay, this still feels appropriate to release. You know, because it could have been a different record. We could have been like, nope. You know, not other people would do that, but I think maybe it's just kind of our approach. So we just weren't going to do something like that.
Got it. You know, considering like the live performance aspect of this and stuff that you guys were talking about earlier, like what does that mean in your mind in terms of matching the mood and the tone and that in terms of like, you know, presenting fans with older material when they come out and see you guys live?
We still have to figure that out.
Yeah, that's the thing, is it's almost like we're like implicitly avoiding that right now, even though we're really not, because right now we're working on a show for the record. So we haven't even really had to have those conversations on how you want to do things. But the relationship, I mean, the relationship on stage is definitely going to be different. I mean, granted, on the last rollout and the last tour, our live show was a lot less personal between us and the crowd. It was a lot more reserved, and there was a lot less interaction. So I don't think that maybe if we sink more into that, I don't think that that's going to be so jarring. You know what I mean? So, but then it's just like Groggs was like really the heart of he really was the heart of a lot of things. You know what I mean? Like it would be a certain point where Parker is so locked in because he's doing the audio and the lights, and I'm just trying to get back to the right vocal effect, that Groggs is the person at the front of the stage that's really, you know what I mean, has his attachment. So we haven't really started figuring that out yet. I don't think we ever really will, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you guys, you know, going into that with as much, you know, detail and explaining in a way that I think for me, as someone who's been following you for a while, and I think for a lot of fans who have a lot of questions along these lines, I think, you know, we fully, you know, understand, you know, like the dynamics going on here and, you know, your feelings about the whole situation and what it means for the group, at least insofar as like you've had these discussions or not had these discussions.
Right.
To start, you know, going through some of the other things that have been on people's minds, I feel like I have to throw this one at you, even though it's probably just like a really quick answer. But there are multiple people asking if there's going to be like a vinyl restock, because I guess it's been sold out. So there's a lot of fans looking to jump back on that if there's going to be more available.
I don't think we expected them to sell out that fast. So this was only like a thing that we started discussing yesterday, but it looks doable to do like an alternate version so that the people with the first 1,000 aren't all mad about theirs being less scarce or whatever, and still be able to get other people records. Like, yeah. So I think we should be able to do like some type of other drop.
Yeah,
we're figuring it out.
If we did it, we wouldn't do any more after that.
Okay.
Like that would be it. And we did see that there was a lot of people that weren't able to get it. I mean, and then the whole idea of the time zone thing, and also, I guess, because we dropped it at a certain time that some people just weren't awake. And I think that we would feel less empathetic about that if we had announced the time, but we so surprisingly did it that people just didn't even have a clue. So maybe like if we are able to do it, like maybe we'll give people a little bit more advance. So maybe if they have to wake up at a weird time just to get it, they'll do it. And then just to know that, you know, if we do it, that will be the last time that we do it. We don't want to keep you know, doing that and try like playing the market or anything. Because really, we at the end of the day, we really are just going to do it because it seems like people really want it, and we were not expecting that to kind of happen that quickly.
Yeah.
So yeah.
A lot of people are asking about some of the, you know, obviously we talked about Z Loopers earlier. You mentioned in the, you know, production of you know, that one beat, the Black MIDI tie-in and everything. And there are some people bringing up the collaboration you've done with Slavs and Melon as well. Are there any other, like, you know, creative tie-in samples, crossovers on the record that you'd be willing to, you know, dive into now that fans can look forward to?
I mean, yeah. Well, I guess not like samples and stuff.
Right.
But
yeah, no, we definitely no like sample snitching. We don't want any sample
it's
snitching.
not snitching. We cleared everything, so it's not snitching. Like, but
it's just
no,
weird.
it's just weird. Yeah.
It's just annoying. I mean, there's Chris from Body Me. He did some drums on the song on the record. He also was on the same tour with us and Jasper, and that was yeah. I mean, they both, Sauce Malone and Body Me, like Chris and Jasper and Chris, they definitely like influence not just like approaching music, but like the practice of making it too, for sure. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I think maybe that was, I wasn't very excited about making music after the last album, or probably even during the last album, if I'm being completely honest. And they like just working with them and that tour. And their music itself, like as music,
their live performances.
Yeah, it was all just like so.
That tour is the biggest inspiration for the album, definitely. People like just that tour, the relationship, like interpersonally, the relationship.
Yeah, because the whole tour. Then we were in Europe with Jockstrap, and of course that ties into Black Country Neuro. That ties like it was really that tour. From that album is almost like my favorite thing about that whole album release cycle. Like,
oh, without a doubt, it also that tour communicated our mentality more than anything we had ever done before. I think when we did that tour, we played with those certain type of acts, people started realizing how we wanted to be, or what we were trying to communicate with our music. Because I think we've always felt disjointed our whole entire career with the music that we were making and how people were like taking it and how they are perceiving it and what they thought that we were doing. And a lot of people were judging a lot of things that we were doing as decisions that weren't us in our entirety. A lot of people were thinking that we were all of something that we did as not a joke, but as a decision, as a creative decision. You know, we made a certain type of thing as a reaction, and that thing wasn't all of us. That was one thing that we were trying to express. And I think that tour communicated a lot, the type of bands that we played with, but also after that, it just brought so much inspiration creatively. I mean, interpersonally, I mean, even in a studious way too. I mean, there was just, it really did a lot for us. And this record just wouldn't be here without that tour. And without the people that were on that tour with us. Yeah, I mean, definitely.
Parker, this may just be kind of like reinforcing some of the stuff that Richie was just saying, but if you could, because you kind of glossed over it for a second there, if you could go into, like, for you personally, over the course of the creative process of the last record, the self-titled record, what about during that time made producing or sort of, you know, being creative in that point in time not as fun or not as something you felt as engaged in, I guess?
It was let's see. It wasn't really so much like interpersonal. Like, it wasn't like some like dramatic things or anything. I mean, we were having like a lot of fun at the time. A lot of fun. That was like the first time we ever toured Europe. We got the Apple Sync, and then we signed a label deal. So like financially, it was like a very comfortable time, and that was like very new. That was like the most money I had ever had, and so it kind of like I don't know. It was a fun time, but I think perhaps all that coming and then the expectation of your first label album, you might have just got too caught up in trying to make the thing that you were supposed to make for that. And maybe that wasn't as fun. Like a lot of the ways we were approaching recording were not artificially, but definitely very planned, trying to recreate fun, like renting the Airbnbs and like pulling up and bringing your friends back, and like all that was definitely trying to get there, and that wasn't even necessary on this album, because it was like something past that, something like freer than that. And it's also something that's easy to say looking back. Like it wasn't like I was in like a terrible spot.
Right.
Maybe during the rollout, but that was more like frustration with the label, I guess. But I think it was mostly having the mindset of trying to make the album that your debut rap album is supposed to be, instead of making this like whatever it is.
It felt more like kind of meeting an expectation as opposed to just kind of creating to create.
And even sonically, I would say that it's our most like like that record. It would like we knew like, okay, this pocket is gonna like this song and this pocket is gonna like this song, and we also knew that it felt like more collage-y of what we had done before, when we felt like Life in the Dentist's Office felt like its own thing, and Floss felt like its own thing, and Drive It Like a Stone felt like its own thing. And like the self-titled project it felt like we were trying to like bring all that together. And then this new record is, I feel like personally the most, it feels like it's definitely its own thing.
Well, actually, this next fan question, Ash to is asking it, and this may be like too broad of a question generally, so like feel free to like zone in on this in any specific way that you can if you feel like it. But I think, a lot of people are probably curious about this sort of idea, given the very, I guess, experimental nature of the songs that you've dropped so far. But he's wondering, like, what do you personally feel is like the future of experimental hip hop? And if there is even an answer to that question for you personally, like, where do you feel like the music you're making right now fits in that framework?
Hopefully it's just like this constant like escaping the framework as it's put up thing. I think that's what we were like really intense, because there's so many artists that come up and like do something like really incredible that is that, and then it enters this thing where like that's now a new experimental area, and it kind of like pulls people in, and it kind of becomes not redundant, but it becomes its own like set of rules almost. And
no, that's true.
And I think for like a big thing for us on this, and that's one thing we've always tried to do, and I think this was just the most we've ever been able to just like do it maturely, is trying to escape that as it's coming up.
And it really would just be that every time. Like, it's really obviously it's no sound or no direction. It's really just always kind of bouncing off of itself. I feel like there's a couple people that are doing that, and you feel them every single time. It's just like everything is almost like a reaction, which I think that's how I would always say that and I feel like the big people who were doing that like early on was like De La Soul, where it's like you felt like this cultural and like creative commentary, not even just narrative wise, like sonically, you know what I mean? And I mean, even the last two
Sloss and Malone records are like a great example of it, because it's really forward, and the fact that he made another album with some of the same like bass structures from the previous album, but it's so much more different.
But it's
than a
like
lot
way
of
more
people.
acoustic and almost like singer-songwriter type. Like it's yeah.
It's more of a change than a lot of people's like one album of this material to a whole nother album of material.
No, I mean that is a good point, because his record that he kind of broke out with, like he could have easily done like 3 more projects exactly in that same vein, and people would have just like ate it the fuck up.
Right. Yeah, right.
And I think that if someone is asking where experimental hip hop or music or whatever is hopefully going, where I would hope it would go, it would be that practice.
Yeah. So where is it going? Somewhere you can't guess it's going.
Yeah, I was about to say that you hope you have no fucking idea. I don't want to know.
You hope it's on the line.
This reminds me of either, I can't remember if this was like an interview I've watched with you guys somewhere else, or if this is like a conversation I was having with you directly at some point. But I remember, and I think this was like at a point before the release of the self-titled, and I don't even know if that record was an idea at this point, but I remember, there being some discourse with you guys talking about all these different like subgenres within hip hop that have cropped up over the past 10 years. And maybe Richie specifically being like a little annoyed with the fact that, it's all just like hip hop at the end of the day. It doesn't need to be like subbed into a sub, into a sub, into a sub, into a sub, because that just kind of seems tedious and needless and kind of just distracts away from the fact that it's all rap at the end of the day. And, with you guys kind of venturing out, as wildly as you have with some of this new material, do you still feel that same way now? And, do you still feel like this new material is fitting underneath that subgenre, or is it crossing over into something else?
I think for me, I wouldn't mind like all the subgenres and even like genre-ing and all that if it was like pushed a little, if it was understood a little more for what it is, like contextually. It's seen as kind of like this like taxonomy that like fixes things what they are. And even, I mean, this is maybe a little corny, but even like the root of the word genre is like a generation. It's like a very like time-based thing.
Yeah.
And
a lot of genre types and names are time-based, like new wave, Yeah.
And so if we came to like see it maybe a little more contextually, it's like shorthand referencing that helps us like navigate these,
understand like different musical eras. Yeah.
And even and connection, like if it was that, like that's beautiful, but it does take on this like fixed thing in the way
that I think that's actually a really smart way of looking at it, and kind of like separating the fantasy from the reality, because the way a lot of people treat it, and sometimes like how you'll see some sites kind of treat it as well, it's as if they're treating it as if it's biology, and you're looking at like a human evolution tree, and you're looking at like, Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal and, branching off into this, sort of species and this species. And it's not like that. It's not, it is like that, in some ways, but it's not a hard science.
Well, then at that point, you're doing like an autopsy on it too. Like you can't do that.
Yeah. At that point, it is kind of like an autopsy, isn't it?
For me, also, sorry to cut you guys off. The thing
jump in. This is your interview.
The thing that always pisses me off about it is that, and people won't admit this shit, but the labels have like certain categories that you have to fill in to get it. So like for an experiment, like the experimental shit or like industrial or whatever, especially experimental, people will only list like experiment, and it can be a race thing. It can be a class thing. Like why, like to me, like why can't, like to me, for example, like Barter 6 by Young Thug, to me, that's an experimental rap album. That's as experimental to me as Black Up is. But there's this whole like mindset that like, and it to me, it feels like, and honestly feels like racism, is it feels like this whole like, well, Shabazz Palaces is trying to be experimental. And Young Thug is
Young Thug is trying to be experimental too, though.
Exactly. That's my point. Is like, and it doesn't even have to be certain things in certain areas. Like the fact that like Man on the Moon 1 isn't considered like an experimental rap album. Like, and that's one thing, but it's like, yeah, like Thug, like for example, that's a big one to me where it's just like, I'll hear some shit and just be like, this, like people need to be talking about this in regards to the innovation that they are talking about. You know what I mean? But it's this whole like, there's like a racial element to it. There's a social economic element to it.
You know, I think it happens along socioeconomic and race lines. I think what it really comes down to culturally is like what audiences and what groups of people like value and how their art is being presented to them or talked to them, you know, because there are certain classes and I guess like cultures of music listeners and art consumers that value the concept or the idea of experimentation, like in and of itself, so much so that something has to be labeled as experimental in order for them to be interested in it in the first place. You know what I mean? Whereas like, you know, your average hip hop fan, if they happen to be listening to something experimental like Barter Six, it doesn't really matter to them whether it's experimental or not, as long as it appeals to them. You know what I mean? Your average like hardcore Young Thug fan probably understands and acknowledges the fact that he sounds unlike any other artist out there. He has his unique flair that you go specifically to him for, you know, but you're probably not like, I guess like, I don't want to use any like crude terminology here, but like, you know, you're not jerking yourself off over the idea of like, oh, he's so experimental, you know, where there are some pretentious music fans that like really get off on that idea.
Yeah, that's good in a way too. Like being able to just experience it instead of like having to fetishize like some notion of, I don't know, like experiencing the experiment is in theory the point of it.
Yeah. And look, and if music stays fresh, there's always going to be an element of experimentation happening anyway. You know, the point at which experimentation stops happening is when just all shit just continues to sound the same forever and there's no change, there's no alteration, there's no risk taking to try to push things in a different direction.
I think part of it too is just people being late. Because you like, I feel like even the like dub communities in Jamaica like did not get their due for being like, I mean, and this is like right at like Lee Scratch Perry just passed away too.
Yeah.
You see the people who like know it like refer to him as like, if you want to call someone the greatest producer of all time, like he's in conversation, and that's now. But I feel like,
right,
I'm sure at the time that wasn't seen as like the same as some experimental art collective in some European city that was like,
yeah, it's not looked at like it's the krautrock scene or whatever. It's like, ooh, Can, ooh, Faust. When you know, when honestly, like when you're thinking about the reggae scene in Jamaica and, you know, even a lot of the reggae that was coming out of the UK as well, like specifically in regards to dub, which you were just, you know, referencing there, like what genre, like around the time that, you know, that, you know, is at its kind of peak creatively has contributed so much to hip hop music, psychedelic music, you know, just experimental music in general. Yeah.
I think if like, you know, it's this tangle of all these things, there's like a knot there at that point in time in Jamaica that like almost every piece of music that gets made today can be like
definitely now. Definitely now.
Like Ableton is like a like very far down the line from the idea of like, oh, we can use the studio gear to make songs too.
Right.
Like, yeah.
No, exactly. And you know, that's something that like obviously they kind of came to their own creative I guess like decisions with in their own way, but you know, their records and their contributions aren't talked about in that way. And yet it's like you could read dissertations from like Brian Eno writing about the same thing, and he's like looked at as that guy, you know, who like conceived that. When, you know, when in fact, like there are even white bands that like pretty much had that, like the Beatles, that already had that concept down before he was even writing anything on that very idea. So, you know, I think it all matters as to like how you're marketed, because Brian Eno's kind of marketed as, you know, experimental, heady brain, studio behind the boards, ambient music master guy. And, you know, anybody else who's doing something that's maybe more for kids, maybe more for young audiences of color,
For
like
parties.
yeah, maybe something more for parties. It's not given that same kind of seriousness. It's not given that like collegiate weight in a way.
And that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. No. And you know, and you put it well. Thank you. You did get some comments on the shirt, and people saying that they loved the shirt. Is there going to be a collab soon? Because I know you're a no collab.
We
soon.
wish. Like, what are you talking about? Woo!
Well, look, all I'm saying is, like, at least for me personally, there is kind of like at least a pattern. I remember before Floss came out, we did have a conversation about how great Cakes the Killa is, and before you know it, you guys crossed over with Cakes. Then we had a conversation about how much you were loving Z Loopers.
That's crazy.
You're working out with Z Loopers. And I mean, I don't know. I feel like every time we talk about something that you're really into, like we're manifesting it in some way. So
All right. Yeah.
There's like a behind the
Let's get it.
scenes one kind of. There's like a producer from East Tumor's last
Camp. Oh, that's
few
true. Yeah, on the record.
That's
Yeah.
like
okay.
on a song.
So
true,
so there's
yeah.
already a little bit of a bridge.
It's a
Nah,
weird
man.
bridge.
Just, this music game is crazy.
Yeah.
You just gotta no. It ain't real to that IG follow. Like,
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. We'll keep us up to date as to
Yeah.
when that happens. All right. Look, we've taken up enough of your time over here. We're at the top of the hour. We greatly appreciate you guys coming through and talking to us about the new record and everything. Is there anything else before the drop of the LP in terms of teasers or anything that you want us to keep
no teasers.
our
but,
eyes
hey,
our eyes out for before the album's finally out?
No, there's no teasers, but
We're
we're doing this record ourselves, and if like I know a lot of people always like wonder like what's the best way that we can support the artist, and I think that's like a really interesting question that we love. Tomorrow Bandcamp, they are doing like it's like the first Friday of every month.
Yeah.
have their
A
feet
lot
on
of
the
our
record.
fans know about the Bandcamp Day stuff.
Yeah. Tomorrow, like if people want to support us, like that would be that's the best way to support us. And we are talking about, in regards to the vinyl conversation, we are talking about potentially doing that again. It would be it wouldn't be like a general
If
thing, but
fans went on there tomorrow, you'd want them to like pre-order the record, you're saying, like on Bandcamp?
Yeah.
Okay.
Our pre-order, just the digital situation.
Okay.
And in regards to the vinyl situation,
Okay.
that is something we definitely are talking
Yeah.
about.
So support Injury Reserve tomorrow, Bandcamp Friday, pre-order the digital.
Yeah, and check out, if you haven't heard the second song, check it out, and just don't think too hard. Just listen. Don't try to be like, what is the time signature on this?
It's 4/4. It is 4/4.
All the songs are degular. This isn't some body meat shit.
I think it's 4/4. It's 4/4 with best
It
of
is.
mine off.
It's definitely 4/4. Just listen to the music. We just had a good time playing it and listening to it, and even the album. We had a good time making it, and that's really what we did. We had a really great time making this record, and as a unit, as us three, we had a lot of fun making this record, and that's really what it's all about. Yeah.
All right. Well, again, we greatly appreciate you guys. We're really looking forward to the LP. And Parker, Richie, thank you once more for coming through.